Hey, what's going on? This is Andrew from the Happy Hearthstone Podcast, the longest running Hearthstone podcast in the history of space and time and cards. But for the podcast you're about to listen to, you better hope you're going second because you are about to coin Concede.
Greetings.
Hello.
Greet.
My greeting.
Well met.
I greet you.
Greetings, traveler.
Greetings, friend.
The pleasure is mine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coin Concede. I am your anchor this week, Ridiculous Hat. Kenny was once again our baseball dad, and we are very proud of him and his son. He might be pitching this year. We'll find out. But for now, joining us from Karazhan, California, it's Botticus.
Hello, everyone.
How's it going, buddy?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm pretty excited about the show we have here
Yeah,
because
this
we
is
also
going to be fun.
we have a couple guests, right?
We do.
We have a famous guest. Well, he's low tier, but he's high in entertainment value. Please welcome the host of Tier 5. We have Rod from Stormwind, Colorado.
What is up, everyone? How's everyone doing tonight?
Doing all right, man. How's it going?
It is going, man. It's been a busy week already, and I am looking forward to the excitement of being on the show tonight.
Well, we're glad to have you, sir. And we have another guest, too. We've got the rare double guester, because from Ungoro, Pennsylvania, we have Fairst Biscuit. Fairst, how's it going?
It's going great. Thank you very much for having me tonight.
Of course. Thanks for being here and also for doing all the million things you do in the Hearthstone community, which we'll find out in the interview segment, which is going to be basically right now. Just to give you a brief outline of what the show is going to be, we've got an interview with both of our guests, and then we're going to talk about our ladder and the news as usual, dig into a fun tournament section. Got a Dexplanations from Bodicus, Master of Combo Priest, and then we are unlikely to have time to get to any questions or emails, but hey, just in the off chance that we get through 5 different segments in under 90 minutes, ha ha ha, then we have some emails set aside. So, we'll see what happens. But Bodicus, Master Interviewer, why don't you start us off?
All right. So we just wrapped up season 1 of the UHL, and we have a winner. And that winner just happens to be on this podcast. So congratulations, Hat, so much on your victory.
Yes. Thanks, man. Hey, Rod, this is for you.
Stop! Go back! Big piles of loot for me, not you.
It's for me, not you. Thanks, Bodicus. Yeah, it's I played on Saturday against Chris in the semifinals, and then on Sunday against Spivey in the finals. So I had to defeat like 3,200 dust to get there, but we made it. And it was a really incredible season 1. And so we have Fairst on also to talk about just what UHL is for those that may not be as aware. And it was a really super positive experience. I couldn't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, so I figured, this week might as well get on the commissioner, the owner or the originator of the person that UHL originated from on the cast to talk to him a little bit about it. And then also we have a semifinalist here as well to kind of talk about his experience. So I figured let's just jump right into it. And so Fairst, kind of for everybody who might not be fully caught up on what UHL is, why don't you give the people an idea, or give the listeners an idea, kind of who you are, what you do, how'd you get involved in Hearthstone, and what kind of started this whole UHL thing we got going on?
Yeah, so obviously I'm Fairst Biscuit. I am the commissioner and the founder of the United Hearthstone League. I got into Hearthstone starting with season 1. I'll be honest with you, I know at the time there was no mobile client back then, and I actually never really owned an actual gaming rig until I think sometime last year. So I think I was actually playing on some kind of laptop. And my origins of finding Hearthstone, I couldn't tell you because they are long gone in my memory. But obviously I'm still here. I'm still loving the game, which is why I started the United Hearthstone League. As for people who aren't aware of what the United Hearthstone League is, it is something built for the community, by the community. And in that, you'll find more popular personalities. Obviously, Ridiculous Hat and Rod Johnson are a part of it. But we also have awesome other members as far as like Chris Plummer and Spivey and Ziggy, all from 1600 Dust represented. We had Ben Reddington from the Dad Legend community represented. And we also had Andrew Brown from the Happy Hearthstone and Rasika from the Hero Power podcast. They were all kind enough to join me for season 1. And we had a really great season, like you already mentioned, with Hat taking the championship. Congratulations, Hat, again.
Thank you.
And yeah, I can't wait to come back and do it again for season 2.
Yeah, I mean, so after I had been doing this podcast here at Concede for a while, I was kind of thinking of something along the lines of getting all these podcasts together, and then I heard about this UHL and thought how perfect it was. So where did you get the idea for this? Where was the thought that kind of branched off into this kind of awesome league that we just had the pleasure of participating in?
So yeah, it originated. Obviously, I love this game. I love Hearthstone. Like I said, I started back in season 1, and a little bit more personal background for me. I've always had a competitive nature. I grew up playing sports, so I really like the competitive aspect. So I figured, what better way than to bring the two things I really enjoy the most together? And I was thinking of ideas how I wanted to go about it, and I figured, what better way to try to just get more of the community involved, and just get everybody within the various podcasting communities, different branches of the Hearthstone community all together to really champion something that we can all really look forward to on a weekly basis. And that's pretty much how I came up with the idea, and it just pretty much took off from there.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I think the idea was actually just perfect, and the execution of it was I think pretty unique. You had a very unique format for the regular season. What made you think to kind of make everybody play all of the classes? What was the reasoning behind the format you ended up choosing?
Yeah, so those of you who aren't familiar with the format, we do a rotation of classes. So in that, you have to play every single class. So it's a best of 5 conquest format standard. And so say, for instance, you bring Priest, Warlock, and Hunter the first week. You cannot bring those classes again until you've selected the other 6 classes for the next 2 weeks. So starting in that example in week 4, you're open to pick whatever classes that you want. And the reason I started that is because I wanted to find kind of a unique format. And I definitely think it is very unique and something that I think the community does enjoy. So you can take a look at that as far as being something different, but there's also 2 other ways to look at it that I've noticed. One is just the additional layer of strategy that it brings. Say, do you want to go with the best meta decks, or do you want to get the worst decks that you think, in your opinion, out of the way first, as far as the rotation goes? And then another thing that I think gets overlooked, but just as important, it really goes back to the whole, bringing the community together and not having anybody left out. And by that, I mean, we can all agree that, Warrior might not be in the best of spots right now. So the last thing I want to happen is, you have like a diehard Warrior player that stumbles upon the league, doesn't really know anybody, and maybe thinks, oh, well, my class isn't really going to get played. And it's just really not the case when it comes to this league, because again, every class is represented when we, go to battle every week during the regular season and in the playoffs.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually really like kind of all of the different metagaming, I guess you can do with just how you approach bringing your classes and what decks you bring, and how you organize your lineup based on knowing that you're going to have to play all 9 classes eventually. I'm actually going to skip around a little bit because I wanted to ask Rod about how your regular season went. But before we do that, why don't we kind of get to know you a bit? I'd like to know, just kind of for maybe our listeners that haven't heard Tier 5 yet, kind of who are you? How'd you get involved with Hearthstone? And, how did you approach this first season of UHL?
So I have been playing Hearthstone since January 1st, 2015. My co-host on Tier 5, Adam, actually got me into Hearthstone. And it was like that mobile thing a lot of the time for those first, year and a half, 2 years, where I was doing I would just complete my quests every day and play random classes and just enjoy the game, but I wasn't super serious about it. And then a while into that, And when Mean Streets came out, I hit rank 1 and without really even trying super hard with Reno Lock. So I was like, that was kind of like the crack that kind of got me into being super competitive at that point, where it was like, yeah, I want to hit legend and I want to do this and that. So at that point, I started like kind of tryharding. And so eventually I ended up joining a 1600 Dust tournament after Ungoro came out, ran by Mr. Fairst Biscuit, and won that tournament and ended up being on 1600 Dust, and it kind of sparked something in me. I had been talking to my co-host Adam about doing a podcast, and he was kind of hesitant, and then he heard me on 1600 Dust, and so he was like, fine, let's go. Started this, and then we kind of went into planning, and Tier 5 started, and it's been a learning process, but it's been a lot of really, really fun days of recording and, you know, interacting with the community and doing just really, really cool stuff. And the podcast has grown a lot over that time. So then Ferris Biscuit came to me and asked me about doing this UHL, and I was like, this sounds awesome. And so I joined. I ended up losing to Spivey in the semifinals. And it sucked, that loss, but like it was a really, really good season. It was lots of fun. It was a blast. So like preparing on a regular week though, or so
Yeah, like how did you approach when Fairst came up to you guys and was like, okay, I'm going to start the UHL and this is the format I want to do. You're going to have to bring all 9 classes over the course of 3 weeks. So what was your thought process kind of going into, okay, how am I going to structure my lineups? Am I going to bring three of what I consider like the best classes one week and the worst, or do you like break it up? How did you approach that?
So most weeks it was, or most 3 sets of weeks, like the first 3 weeks, my plan was bring 2 of the stronger classes and 1 of the 3 weaker classes. I was trying to distribute the weaker classes, so I want to have a week where I was hampered by a particularly bad class. The second 3-week schedule kind of got thrown for a loop because Chris from 1600 Dust was like, let's do a meme off. And so I ended up like kind of throwing all 3 bad classes, quote unquote, into the 3 of the not as good classes into that week. But my strategy going in was kind of distribute the bad classes or the classes I didn't feel as comfortable with, so I wouldn't ever have to be like have a week where I had 2 or 3 classes where I didn't feel good about, you know. I have all 9 golden classes though, so it's one of those things where I generally feel comfortable with all the classes. It's just the strength of the classes in the current, you know, meta situation. So
Okay. So how does that contrast with kind of how you organized your lineups for the first couple weeks?
So I went in and I think I picked. I played Ben Reddington like the very first week, and I tried to kind of distribute it. Like I said, I think I brought like Rogue and I don't even remember what else I brought. Rogue and Warlock and something else, and Druid, I think, because I lost 3 games in a row with Druid. It was not good. Luck on my hand. It was funny because I was casting those games against Ben, and I was Druid. Like I said, I was playing a J Druid list, and he was playing a really, really heavy aggro lineup, and it was 3 weeks in a row or 3 games in a row where I was like, okay, if I get a swipe, I'm fine here, and I didn't draw a swipe any of the games I was playing that Druid deck, and I was like, no. So it was just like it was that. So it was I had like decks completely fail on me multiple times during the league, and that kind of, it feels bad when you bring a deck into a matchup like that and you go, well, this didn't work out well. And so that was one of the things I tried to be prepared with my decks. I tried to be prepared with my lineups, but sometimes those things just didn't work out super well.
So Hat, what was kind of your strategy? Did it kind of pair similarly to how Rod was looking at his, or did you have a different idea when you kind of were trying to suss out this format?
So I started week one by picking Shaman and Warrior because no one knew what they were doing quite yet. That was the main reason why I paired up those weaker classes week one because I just wasn't sure what we were going to encounter. And once it became clear that we were seeing mostly but not entirely meta decks for the better classes, and then for the classes that were maybe a little bit less prominent in the meta, we were seeing a lot of diverse homebrew decks that were being brought. Um, it became a much more interesting format as time went on. But I'll be honest, I mostly picked classes based on my opponent. As in, I said, okay, I'm playing Ziggy week 3. I need to have Druid up. Okay, I'm playing against Rod. I need to bring Kingsbane Rogue to try and tilt him. And a lot of what I did was pick classes that would somehow relate to what my opponent was doing. I did in the second rotation try and separate Shaman and Warrior. I brought Mage, Shaman, Hunter one week to try and be more aggressive, and then the following week I brought Warrior with a bunch of control decks, just to try and make sure my strategy was more consistent, because this is a no-ban format. So if I wanted to say I bring 3 control decks, I can bring 3 control decks, and you're able to kind of have a consistent strategy if you space out your classes. But I started off by playing weaker into stronger the first rotation. Second rotation, I was kind of strategic in which do I want in terms of overarching strategy. And it wound up, I think, 2 rotations in a row, I had both Warlock and Paladin in the third week. Because I was always thinking, how can these worst decks work together? I was never thinking we need to prioritize the stronger archetypes, and so they just ended up with Warlock and Paladin together so many times in those weeks where I generally crushed with them. Though week 6 against Ben Reddington, I don't remember what I had, but I remember he swept me, and it was the first time I had lost a match, and he made it look super easy. So it was kind of fun to see how the metagame developed over a 7-week period and then into the playoffs.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, or it'd be interesting to see kind of that expanded out over more weeks. But so Fairst, since this was the first season, kind of what were your expectations going into this? How did your expectations line up with reality? Um, yeah, tell me about how season 1 went.
Okay, so my expectations were I kind of wanted to see what the community would think would happen as far as like a social media standpoint. Like I figured maybe we get like 100 followers, and just to see how people took it from a week to week basis to see if maybe would people would stick around, maybe people would lose interest. And I think we really found a sweet spot with the length of the season. We actually finished the season with over 250 followers, so that blew it out of the water as far as I'm concerned, and that goes. So my expectations, they were definitely all, they were definitely blown away. I mean, the outpour and support I got for the league as the weeks went by only grew and grew, and just hearing it on various podcasts, just getting it out there, it's really, I can't be happier. I mean, I'm so thankful for the support from everybody that's involved, and even just the community in general. Is just the support is just so overwhelming, and it just really gives me the motivation to keep going and make things better. So
Yeah, I mean, the product that you put out, I think, was just it showed how much work you put into it, because you put in a ton of work to this, and I think people really rallied behind being able to kind of just support their favorite content creators. So, yeah, overall, I think the first season was just extremely well put together, and excited for things in the future. But speaking of like kind of the finals, where was the idea, since you kind of had this idea already to really involve all 9 classes in the regular season, and then we had this semifinals and finals where the 9 classes were drafted, and then the 9th class, actually both players had to win with that. Where did you get that idea from, somewhere else, or did you just kind of come up with that idea yourself?
okay, so it's actually a little bit of a story behind that. Coming into season 1, I knew I wanted Ridiculous Hat in the league. I had no real prior um, communication with him. But everybody I talked to up to that point was, hey, you should probably reach out to Hat. He would probably be a huge asset to the league, and he's got his hands in almost everything Hearthstone. So going into that meeting, I'll be honest, I didn't know what to expect. So I knew I had a big task ahead of me, but he was incredibly helpful in giving feedback, and things really worked out. And he gave me the idea for the playoff format, and as far as the drafting style goes, it was something I hadn't even considered going into that meeting, I should say. So we worked things out, and he offered his advice, and it really just took off from there. I love the format. I think it went over really well, and I think the players that were involved really enjoyed it as well.
So what you're saying is this whole thing was fixed because Hat knew the knew the final format before anybody else. He came up
he
with it
knew
himself.
he knew 8 weeks in advance he was going to be winning with
I'm
the
calling
format.
BS. This was set up. Hat, damn it. I'm coming for you. That trophy is set up, and I don't appreciate this. And
Hey Rod, this is for you.
So Hat, then, since this kind of seems like your idea, how did you approach the draft format? What was your strategy going into it? Did it kind of go as planned, or did somebody throw a wrench in your plans?
So my plan was prioritize Warlock and Paladin, and both of my opponents took Priest second. So I took Warlock and Paladin. And Rogue, I love Rogue. I don't think it's in a great tournament spot right now, and I am a known filthy Rogue player. So I specifically took Hunter or Mage third based on what was available, and let my opponents take Rogue from me because I didn't think there was a consistently viable Rogue strategy that would make it in the finals. And then I took Shaman if it was available, and it was once and not the other time. And I let Warrior be kind of the double deck because I thought it was generally weak. Spivey's strategy, it turns out in the finals, was make sure both players have Shaman because it creates more variance in games and is more likely to low roll. But also there's that occasional high roll, which you may have all seen in game number 9. So it's my strategy was generally kind of play off my reputation a little bit, and then just start off by taking the 2 strongest classes. And Priest is generally it's very good in the tournament format as well, but I think it's just not quite as it doesn't have quite as much raw power and polarized matchup ability as Warlock and Paladin do.
So do you think that, because I was pretty interested to hear you say that, because I would have thought my natural progression would have been, if the first person picks Warlock, then I want to pick Priest, with the thought that Priest has the best chance against Warlock, with the idea that, yes, Paladin may be the second strongest class, but it matches up very poorly against Warlock. Did you have any thought into maybe that being the case, or do you think that since you're playing so many games, it's so unlikely that your Paladin runs into the Warlock that it just makes more sense to pick up Paladin?
So this is a best of 9 format. Both players have 5 active decks, and I think you're more rewarded by having a little bit more diversity because you're not going to consistently be able to, in a 5-deck format, have a consistent strategy between 5 decks. They can't all be good aggro decks or all be good control decks. There's going to be a mix there. I'd rather have a little bit more diversity of strategy because the Warlock might play against the Priest, but it could play against any of the other 5 decks. And I think that Warlock and Paladin have the greatest number of favored matchups, even though those matchups aren't the same. Because I want to win as many times as possible against diverse lineups, and I expect in a 5-deck format that lineups are going to be necessarily diverse, especially when they include Shaman and Warrior. There just aren't that many strategies that are that those decks both beat. And so, as you saw, I got a bad matchup against Spivey by queuing up Shaman into his Warrior. He was at 56 life. He killed all my stuff like 9 times, and then he just had everything, and I had nothing. That kind of matchup is going to happen. So yeah, if Warlock faces against Paladin, or if Priest faces off against Warlock, it's not going to be great for me. But there's not really going to be any way for me to stop that deck from picking up a win somewhere else. So I'd rather just have a bevy of styles that are all equally powerful or similarly powerful.
I would also be somewhat worried the Warrior is very likely to be in in the lineup, as it's very likely to get picked last or second to last. So Paladin does lose a bit there, especially if your lineup includes both Warlock and Warrior, which I think are potentially not great matchups for Paladin, but I do understand what you're saying. I was going to ask Rod, kind of how did you like? Did you think along the same lines as Hat when it comes to the pick order for these, or did you have a different thought or a different strategy in mind?
So I knew I wanted to start off with Warlock, and I've played a lot of Control Warlock and Cube Block over the last couple months. And from there, after Spivey picked Paladin, he picked Priest, I was like, Paladin is a super strong deck right now. At that point, it's more of a free for all, right? It's kind of a consensus you have in those top tiers. You have Warlock, Priest, Mage, and Paladin, and those were the first 4 decks picked. At that point, I went with Hunter, because Hunter has some really, really, really strong games in this meta with just its Spell Hunter matchup, right? That deck can do really, really strong things to almost any deck in the meta, especially if you're playing with Barnes and dropping him out.
Especially Barnes on turn 4.
Yeah. So that was cool. It was kind of the thing. And then at that point, when you get into those last, 3 classes, especially, it's pick your poison at that point. I picked Rogue and Spivey picked Shaman. Rogue, I knew that I could get a win with Kingsbane with the decks that Spivey had picked with, Priest and everything else, and Druid. I knew somewhere I would get a win with that deck. And I don't know if I fully realized going in, and it just might have been an oversight on my part. I don't think I realized that I was going to have to play Warrior when no one picked it. And this is because I'm really bad with details at times. So going in and leaving Warrior there, and I'm like, fudge. And I know what some of you thought I was going to say there, no, but no.
I had the bleep button ready.
I didn't. I was a good boy. I am a Boy Scout, and America first, and all these things. But no. So it was just really trying to pick the decks that I felt were strongest. I wasn't thinking as much about matchups, because the problem, as you talked about, Vodicus, is you don't know what you're going to line up with. So you can't go in picking, especially with like a format where you have to bring 5 decks. You can't predict what the other person is going to bring. You can try, but you're likely going to be wrong. So it was kind of, my strategy going in was kind of like pick the strongest class of the ones that are left and go from there.
So speaking of, trying to find the right lineups, what about how you kind of set out what decks you brought out first? I noticed something that was fairly consistent among the people who had Warlock in their lineup is that Warlock was a deck that you saved pretty much as long as possible. Was there and I also seem to think that whatever the 9th class was seemed to come out pretty early. Rod, what was kind of your thought process behind the order with which you were trying to get wins with your decks?
I wanted to get the crappy deck out of the way as quickly as possible, and as everyone who saw that whole match with Spivey, it didn't work out well. But Warrior, I knew, was going to be the biggest problem out of all the decks, and so I was just trying to get the bad matchups out of the way. I wasn't concerned about winning with Warlock, even though I didn't end up winning a game with Warlock in the end. I won games with Priest and with Paladin and Hunter and Rogue, and all my losses came between Warrior and Warlock. So it's one of those things where you go get the bad things out of the way quickly and just try to play to your strengths the rest of the series. It didn't work out well because that Cthulhu Warrior deck I brought, just Spivey's decks kind of dealt with it in a way that wasn't good on my end. So it was just a luck of the draw kind of thing. So
And Hat, I noticed the kind of your queuing order seemed fairly similar to kind of how Rod was queuing decks up. Did you have a thought process behind that, or were you using the old random method and it just happened to be the kind of Warlock came out later?
No, it's the stronger decks just have a wider spread of good matchups, and the weaker decks just have a worse one. So you really don't want to save that weaker deck till the end and watch it run into poorer matchups that you just have no option to beat. It's a lot of these decks. Like I think in the finals, my Shaman lost 3 times before it got a win against a deeply unfavored matchup because I high rolled a little bit after a little bit of low rolling. But it's if you save those weaker decks for later, your opponent's just more likely to have things that are going to beat them, and you're more likely to have matchups you can't escape. Whereas Control Warlock is pretty likely to have a wide spread of good matchups. Dude Paladin is pretty likely to have a wide spread of good matchups. So saving the stronger decks for later just seemed like it was less likely that I'd paint myself into a corner. And also, I wanted to make sure I got a chance to draw Barnes first.
And you happened to draw Barnes quite a bit with Hunter, it looked like.
I drew it 3 times between the semis and the finals, and I drew Yasharaj one of those 3 times. So, we can still call it high rolling for sure. But that first game was a high roll until it wasn't.
Right. So in terms of your opponent's lineups, were you pretty prepared for the decks that they brought, or did they bring anything that surprised you that you weren't ready for?
No, I had planned when I played against Chris to play against 4 Old Gods decks. So, I was expecting lots of Cthulhu's. No, I had no idea. There's no way of knowing. Like, when Spivey took Warrior and gave up Shaman for both players, I got an idea that it was going to be some kind of Taunt Warrior. But his Rogue was a really smart choice. And when you see Rogue, that's the thing. I gave it away because I didn't know what was good. And Spivey figured out that Miracle was actually not too bad against a lot of the decks that I had brought, and he was able to make it work. So I think Chris and Spivey both did the right thing by bringing non-standard decks in some of these weaker classes, and Rogue in particular. You can't really play Kingsbane unless you get real lucky with the matchups. Tempo Rogue isn't really good. There is an Elemental Rogue list out there, but it's Miracle and Cthulhu honestly wasn't terrible. I think they both made informed choices there, and it's really hard to predict what people are going to bring in a 9-deck format. And UHL in particular is all about the individuality of the players. Everyone has a different philosophy. Everyone has a different idea. It is a completely unproven, unsolved, un-everything metagame. And seeing what people did was definitely really interesting and very hard to see what was coming.
Yeah, I totally agree. Rod, what about you? Were you ready for the decks that Spivey brought, or did he bring anything crazy?
His Shaman deck was a little strange. He had a weird mix of the Jade list that had been popping up and with the Bloodlust thrown in. So that was a little unique. I don't know what I expected from his Warrior. That Taunt Warrior did a really good job of winning, even though it wasn't. I mean, Warrior is Warrior, right? I don't think I expected Jade Druid. I thought he would bring something a little bit either Big Druid or Aggro Druid, because Jade Druid's kind of disappeared from a lot of the meta. So I kind of had an idea, but I kind of didn't. He kind of surprised me with some of the stuff, and that didn't help. I mean, if you go into playing Jade Druid with a bunch of, control-y kind of decks, you're going to have a bad time. And it's one of those things where he just did a lot of really smart moves and took advantage of my decks.
Well, congratulations to both of you. Had on a obviously amazing win there, and Rod, really congratulations on a semifinal finish. That's definitely a very. You guys both played extremely well. It was awesome to watch everything, and I think it was a very successful season 1.
It was a blast. Fairst did an awesome job. That everyone involved was super cool. Everyone participating was awesome. It was more the fun than I thought it was going to be, and I thought it was going to be a blast going in. So,
Great. So now that season 1 has ended, I know, Fairst, you're already starting to prep for season 2. You have anything you want to maybe, preview for fans of the UHL? Maybe any future plans or any future differences in the format that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so going in for season 2, I have quite a few meetings set for this week, and the ones that I've had so far have been successful as far as gaining new players into the league. So we will be expanding the roster. I'll keep it at that for right now. Um, but as far as the format goes, we are going to bring back the same format for season 2 and see how that goes with a bigger roster size. And that's pretty much all I'm willing to give out for now. So just stick around, and we definitely got more in the coming weeks for sure.
Yeah, and can they find more announcements if they're when they're looking for when you're ready to announce some more things for season 2?
Yeah, so everything can be found on both our Instagram and Twitter pages. It's going to be at United HS League, and that's where you'll find all the big updates as they come in.
Great. And I actually have a bit of an announcement regarding UHL. So for season 2, Fairst has asked me to come on as one of the main casters. So kind of my plans right now for season 2 is I'm going to have a set date with every week where I'll be casting one of the matches of the UHL. And then also I'll be working with all of the competitors and trying to cast as many as fits in my schedule, essentially. So I'm going to be one of the main casters. I'm really excited about it. I'll be looking to do as much of that as I can, and bring you guys a in-depth analysis view of a lot of these fun games. We've had some amazing games in season 1. I just can't wait for season 2 to start and work on some casting.
Yeah, to add on to that, if I can, if you're looking to get into casting and you would like to be a part of the UHL, please reach out to either myself or Boticus. Like Bot said, he's going to be heading up everything in regards to casting, but we're definitely looking for people. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out, and we'd love to hear what your ideas are and how you can benefit the league moving forward.
Yeah, great. So now that we've got that all taken care of, why don't we talk about some ladder? So I guess Kenny has a little note in here. He wants everybody to know that he did end up hitting Legend in Wild with about an hour to spare and ended up at about 213 Legend, which is pretty awesome. I know Kenny was pretty set on making sure that he got there last season, and it's really awesome to see that he was able to achieve that there. So, Hat, what have you been doing on ladder this last week?
An hour to spare. That is a close call, man. That's
Yep.
that's like the first time he's hit legend in a while. Like in wild, but also since I think he said the last time he hit legend was when Secret Paladin was in standard. It's been a little bit. Good for him.
Yeah, man. I mean, he's he's as busy as he's been. That's even crazier. And I actually think there was a poll on Twitter I saw about the prestige of hitting Legend in Wild, and as somebody who has hit Legend in Wild, I can definitively say that it is not any easier to hit Legend in Wild than it is standard. It takes just as much work. The competition over there is just as tough, and the decks are just as hard to pilot. So, big props to him. But anyway, as you were talking about your ladder, Hat.
Yeah, well, and I 100% agree on you. Like legend is legend. It's hard. It's a volume of games that you have to play really, really well under significant pressure. Like there is no easy legend. Doesn't matter. Even with the new ladder system, if you want to start off at rank 4 and then say, "Oh, legend is easy. Let me just get it right away." Like if you haven't done it before, it's just as hard as it was before. And if you have done it before, it's just as hard as it was before because you're just
Yeah.
jumping to the hard part of the ladder, right? If you
Yeah.
regularly hit legend, just you will never see another win streak as long as you're playing Hearthstone, and you just have to play one game at a time. It's really difficult. So I'm at rank 5. Feels pretty good. But there's a problem. I'm a priest gamer now. And I don't know when it happened or how it happened. And for those of you not watching the video, Bodicus is over there with an evil smile and nod on his face, like the Snoke from Star Wars. Like you're just over there like, let the hate flow through you.
The problem is here that you've been hanging out with people like Bodicus and Wicked Good way
Yeah.
too much.
They are both
And-
100% the problem here. And here's the thing. But Bodicus told me to play, well, told everyone to play Inner Fire Priest. And then Wicked Good said, hi, I've got this Control Priest deck that also has double Void Ripper and kills people. And both those decks kill people with butts. And I don't know if you know this about me.
I like big butts and I cannot lie.
So I start off by playing Bodicus's Combo Priest. And I like Combo Priest a lot. It's a very difficult deck to play. It feels not quite Tempo Rogue, not quite Miracle Rogue, but it's the Mulligan is the most complex part of any Hearthstone deck I think I've ever played, and that kind of really dictates your game state. So I've always enjoyed the deck, and it had a filthy, filthy turn 5 kill that involved double Northshire into double Shield into Radiant Elemental into an Elixir copying the Radiant Elemental, and I killed on turn
I love
5
those
against a
turns.
Druid. It was so gross, and but then Wicked Good said, I have Void Ripper Control Priest, where you just kill everything. You're good against Warlock because you steal all their Void Lords. You're good against Paladin because you kill all their stuff. And then you kill them. And he showed me a screenshot. He had 2 Primordial Drakes, and his opponent was at 20, and then they were dead. I was like, what happened? How did that happen?
as Fairst, as Wicked Good states himself on a regular basis, he's not a good person. Is how he puts it. He enjoys making people suffer on the ladder.
But it's good to be bad, and so I've been really enjoying it. My win rate with the deck has been bonkers good, and so I hit rank 5, and it does feel nice with the new ladder system. I know we'll talk about it in a little bit, but I really enjoy how there's a lot less pressure to just get in a ton of games. We'll talk about that next section, but and in Wild, I think I'm at rank 13. I hit rank 10 last month, and that was where I kind of stalled out there. So I'm pushing a little bit with Alaneth Mage, and it feels, again, that's a deck that feels like you're making people uninstall the game, but it's really, really good. So I'm enjoying it for now.
That's the one deck I refused to play in the Tavern Brawl last week. I was like, I'll play Giant's Walk, I'll play Aggro Shaman, I'll play Big Priest, but I will not play Secret Mage. I refuse.
But it's so good, and you play extra secrets because you have Mad Scientist, and then they play a Void Caller, and then you polymorph, and it's like, nice deck, idiot.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I've played a bit of standard Secret Mage, and it's just for me, it's just one of the least enjoyable decks for me to play. But I mean, it is what it is. I'm sure other people enjoy it. So as long as other people enjoy it, great. I'm gonna try to play decks that don't lose to it.
That's
there
fair.
are plenty of people on the ladder who don't care how miserable decks are to play, that the only thing they care about is winning. And this has been a thing for a very long time in Hearthstone. I mean, back to, Aggro Shaman and Secret Paladin, where people are like, I don't like playing this deck, but it wins. So it's one of those things where people don't mind being scumbags when it gets some stars in Hearthstone.
Listen, man, I love playing with Doomhammer. Oh my god, do I love playing with Doomhammer. That deck was one of my favorites. I went rank 3 to Legend in one night on stream with that. It's, and playing it in WoW, like, I'm not going to say it makes me feel like I'm doing good things to the other person, but I don't feel like a scumbag when I play that deck. I feel like a trip down memory lane. I think what's interesting to notice that just everyone has their own kind of play style and their own things they like about Hearthstone and things they don't. And it's interesting to see that when I talk with Wicked Good about it, we have the best friendship based on the most different opinions possible, because he loves Big Priest, and I'm like, how can you love that? But I like Tempo Rogue, and he's like, that deck is my kryptonite. So it's kind of interesting to see what works for some people really doesn't work for others. And Secret Mage, I mean, Bodicus, I don't think anyone has enjoyed losing to that deck ever, but plenty of people like beating it, which is why Paladin is so good right now. But the deck just, you spend all your resources, and then sometimes you have Alaneth, sometimes you don't, and then the game ends one way or another, and I can see how it can be unfulfilling to play. That's how I'm going to put it.
So how about you, Rod? What have you been doing on ladder? I assume it does not involve anything Combo Priest or Kingsbane Rogue like.
No, you are half right. I have been playing a lot of combo priests last couple of days.
Really?
Yes.
How's that been going?
It's generally pretty good. I've had a pretty good win rate with the deck. It's the thing with that deck though that can be frustrating is with the large number of warlocks on the ladder, they have, as soon as you start playing like shadow visions and stuff, they're like, yeah, I'm not gonna have this. And then they start like dark pacting their own void lords and start doing like awful things that make your life as a deck that your whole purpose is to hit them in the face once with a 48 and make them hurt down to their soul. But generally, the deck can handle almost anything on the ladder in some way. I think Warlock seems to be its worst matchup. You can correct me because you've played the deck a lot more than I have. But and when I haven't been playing that, I've been playing a little Q block because at various points in the last week, I've been playing a lot of Paladin, and Q block does a good job of dealing with Paladin as long as you pull your AoE. So I'm at rank 4 today. Like the last time I played, I lost 3 games in a row, including a stupid quest rogue. So as Hat knows, like quest rogue has, I think, brought me more rage than almost any other deck in the history of Hearthstone. But
Freeze Mage?
No. The problem with Quest Rogue is that when it draws as well as it tends to against me, it just, you sit there and you go, well, now he's got 87 5/5s of charge that are going to hit me in the face continuously, irregardless of what I've done or played. Or it's the whole playing solitaire where you're destined to lose from the get-go that makes me a sad panda. So
Fair enough.
Quest Rogue is my least favorite deck ever in Hearthstone history by a lot. I would much rather play against a Freeze Mage.
Okay. So Fairst, what have you been playing?
So I've been dabbling on the wild side of things, just trying to get a feel for what's going on over there. I prefer mill decks, so I like to play like a lot of mill rogue, trying out mill druid and some dead man hand warrior. So I really enjoy those decks, so I've been trying to get those to work for me. And more like the old school mill rogue, not Kingsbane mill rogue is what I prefer.
Okay. Cool. So for me, this weekend I hit Legend on Asia with this lovely combo priest that we'll be talking about later. It's one of these decks that like it just kind of speaks to me. I've always been a combo player, and just the different ways that you win are just so enjoyable. So I've had a lot of really sweet ones, including an awesome win I had the last week, which I mentioned in Discord. But I was playing against Quest Mage, and I got a Kabbalist Tome off of a Draconid Operative, and then the Kabbalist Tome gave me Potion of Polymorph and Explosive Runes. So I was able to get to a point where they were at, I think, 7. They must have been at 7, and I silenced my own minion to put them to 4, and then played both secrets in the order so that it would polymorph their minion and then kill them, and cackled maniacally. It was great.
So, did you take advantage of the whole one game to Asian Legend?
No, I didn't. I started at rank 5 full stars. I didn't play at all once I heard that it was broken, because I didn't feel like it. And then on NA, I'm rank 3. Probably try to push for Legend this weekend and see about maybe actually getting like a top 200 finish. That'd be nice one of these weeks here. But anyway, that was a nice long intro there. Why don't we go on to some news, Hat? Oh wait, we have a new pledge.
We can do that, but we do have a new pledge. We want to say thank you to Alfred S. Thanks for your support of the show. And for those of you listening, we appreciate any and all support you can provide us, whether it's your sweet company, a retweet here and there, but But if you want, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/CoinConcede, and everything you give us goes straight back to supporting the show. So thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you, Alfred. And why don't we go into the news, Botticus? I think that's a great idea. All right, so new ladder, hooray! But the first day was a little rough. So Rod alluded to this. Rod, what did you mean by that one-day Asian legend? Why don't you tell us about this?
So, not to brag, humble brag too much, but I did have the fantastic Ant on tier 5 this week, and he talked about how the number of games it took him to hit legend on the Asian server was one game. He started off at rank 5 stars on the Asian server, and he was not the only one. It was of many. So anyone who had hit legend last season on the Asian server started off, if you played before they shut the servers down, at rank 5 stars. So all you had to do was win one game and you were in legend.
And this was after the reset, right? So what happened is right after the reset, people were playing and getting multiple stars for wins instead of just 1 star and able to hit legend really quickly. And there was a weird thing that happened where someone got rank 0 legend. So they kind of had to shut down all of ranked and kind of reset everybody back to what they should have been. But some people did not get reset back exactly to what they should have been reset to, and some people got obviously reset to rank 5 stars. I believe it was mostly people that were playing before they shut down ranked, and so some people like Ant and I believe Stan Sifka said that basically once they brought ranked back up, people that had played were set at ranks that Blizzard was essentially saying that this is what we think they would have gotten based on how they played before ranked was shut down, and it was incorrect for quite a few people and caused some other issues.
And the legend matchmaking as well was still kind of funky in that there were
Yep.
people like rank 7 or 8 that were playing against rank 200 legend players. I think Tyler OTD tweeted his win-loss record, and he had, I think, a 60-something% win rate and lost over 1,000 legend ranks. So,
Yep. And he wasn't the only one. There were
Yeah.
lots of posts like this.
So the issue was, I think that the guesses were that the MMR system was completely hosed because the MMR system was based off at least 100 games to hit legend. So what was happening was these people were losing. They would get, like 5, 10, 20 points for a victory and then lose 200 for a loss. So as everyone knows, that a good Hearthstone player loses 3 or 4 games out of 10. So if you're losing 200 points for every loss in 10 games and gaining 20 points for every win, you're going to go in the wrong direction.
Yep. Towards the end of the month, a lot of people are saying that in order to get a top 25 legend finish, you need like a 57% win rate and just spamming tons and tons of games. So the fact that at this point in the month, you could only have, or you had something astronomical like a 70% win rate and then lose legend rank was pretty disheartening to a lot of players. I did want to say something along these lines, though. I thought that Ray C did a great job on Twitter of kind of bringing up these issues of the different, legend ladder issues and being set at the wrong rank. But I also saw a couple of tweets from people that were just kind of saying, I can't believe Blizzard didn't get this right this time. And to those people, I kind of wish that it's like, okay, well, I'm going to wait for them to figure out how to fix it because this is a new thing that they're doing and they're trying to improve quality of life. If you don't want to wait, tell you what, you can be set back to rank 16 and you can just grind up from rank 16 for the rest of this, and not just this month, every month in the future, because I want to let them have time to fix the mistake. You obviously are too impatient to let them implement this quality of life improvement.
It frustrates me to no end because Blizzard continuously does these things to improve the state of the game, and these people who are just miserable individuals, many of them will sit there and cry and complain about anything they can. And the whole thing happened, and when they shut down the ladder, the outrage and crying for free stuff is just, you people are entitled. I can't say the words I would say normally on my podcast, but like, it's the fact that these it's one of those things where I wish Blizzard would just ignore Reddit. I think that Blizzard kind of takes Reddit into, they think about what is said on Reddit way too much, because they quote the feels bad things when making decisions in the game. And I feel like a lot of their feels bad decisions come from Reddit. So when people go in and awful things that happen on Reddit, or awful things happen in the game and they end up on Reddit, if you cry and complain enough on Reddit, I feel like it gets to Blizzard, and kind of wish they would stop doing that. I really wish they wouldn't have given out 3 packs for this. Because
I think it's fine. Basically, what I'm trying to say is be productive. Don't be toxic. Something we kind of just preach is, be productive. Let them know what the issues are so that they have more information how to fix them. This compensation that they're giving us, by the way, which we're going to be receiving 3 packs of Kobolds and Catacombs because of all the issues with the rollover. I think it's great to get that, but yeah, just be productive. Don't be detrimental and just be angry for the sake of being angry.
Yeah, I mean, just going off what Bot said, I mean, it is something brand new that they're implementing. I mean, obviously they have the old ladder system, but this is definitely a big step for them in the right direction, in my opinion. So, I mean, just to have like a little hiccup here as far as, not being set back to the right rank. I mean, like Bot said, you could get, do you want to go back to rank 16? I'm sure a lot of players up there would prefer not to have to make that grind. So, I mean, just the fact that we're getting compensation from them, I think is, awesome on their end. Shows that they're responding and they're admitting to their mistake, and they're obviously trying to fix it. I'm sure there was people working, doubles and triples or whatever they had to do to get it fixed and get everything back in working order. So, I mean, I can only applaud them for doing that. So, I mean, that's my take on it. So,
they canceled a hype event for the Year of the Raven. This is when they start building up the hype and excitement for their first expansion and the other 2 coming out this year. It's super important to them because it gets the community hyped up, it gets them going and excited for this first expansion. That shows you how dedicated they are to this, because it goes, okay, we're going to put this stuff off. That stuff's in the future. We need to fix now. And I can commend them all day for doing that, because it shows that their priorities are set straight.
Yep. I mean, and looking at this from as balanced a perspective as I can, Blizzard is trying to constantly improve the game. They communicated well, constantly had updates, reprioritized what they were doing, gave us free stuff. All this shows that Blizzard is a great company. We want to be part of it. But we couldn't play ladder for a day. And that's the first time that's happened since the game has been out of beta. So I'm not going to say this shouldn't have happened. I'm going to say I think it's justifiable for the community to be upset. Not justifiable for the community to say, how could this ever have happened? Because it turns out developing software is hard, especially when there are millions upon millions of users. And they fixed it within 24 hours. It's the biggest amount of downtime Hearthstone has literally ever had. So for this to be the first time ever is a big deal. I'm glad the game has been so stable for so long, but should there be compensation for the game being unavailable for 24 hours? I mean, they didn't have to, but I think it's reasonable that they did because they recognize this is an unusual event. And is it reasonable for the community to say, we are upset because we want to play this game and we can't? I think you could make the argument that it is. Again, there are some sources that are going to be more reactionary than others, and Bot and Fairst, you touched on it. It's being productive in your feedback is a positive thing, and being disappointed that you can't engage with the game that you love is a good sign of how much we love the game. But it's hard to be happy when the game was taken away in the main format for over 24 hours. So, complicated situation. I'm glad they got it fixed. And I will say that new ladder, not having the pressure to play 300 games a month to hit legend is pretty fantastic. It's it just it takes a lot of the pressure off to feel like I need to constantly be jamming Hearthstone to get to my goal, even if it's the same goal every month. Now it's play at your leisure and your convenience. And really, the only grindy part of the game that's left, 5 to legend is still tough, but the grindiest part of the game that's left is legend to high legend. And part of me thinks that system is still pretty broken, especially the last 24 hours is really unhealthy. But part of me also thinks if you're going to be a competitive Hearthstone player, turns out you got to play a lot of Hearthstone. So it's really difficult to kind of balance that and say that the grind of the game isn't focused where it needs to be. I think they're getting a lot closer than they were before.
Yep, definitely agree with that.
Cool. Well, and like Rod said, they canceled the hype stream, the Year of the Raven live stream. Disappointed that we didn't get to see it, but it's coming soon. And there's a lot of hints that they're dropping about what's coming next. There is a rumor on Hearthstone Top Decks that it's Duskwood, but we don't have any information yet, so we will see. Now, apparently Go ahead, Bot.
I was going to say, you were probably just about to say this, but I also heard that they bought the name Cenarian Circle. Was that what you were about to talk about? Blizzard bought the name Cenarian Circle.
No,
I
you
believe
should
is-
talk about
is
this
what it's
because I don't
called.
know what you're talking about.
Okay, I will have to find the link, but I heard that somewhere they bought the name Cenarian Circle, and that is likely going to be our next expansion.
And what's interesting from a quick search here is that the Cenarian Circle has a major presence in Silithus, which is an area in World of Warcraft that is the setting of the beginning of the next WoW expansion. So I wonder if there's an intention of a tie-in there because you get a card back from pre-ordering Battle for Azeroth. I wonder if there is some kind of connection there because Hearthstone has had WoW characters, but they've never done the same thing in both games at the same time, I don't think. So that would be really, really cool. That's interesting. Okay. Thanks for bringing that up, Bud. I guess I had no idea. Now,
I just had a quick question about those two areas of Warcraft. I'm not familiar with those. Is there any kind of like theme that you might see from those areas, or
so
is it?
the theme right now in WoW that's going into the next expansion. Right now, we're in Legion, where everybody is fighting against the Burning Legion, led by Sargeras. At the end of Legion, mild WoW spoilers for anyone that hasn't played this so far. Sargeras stabs Azeroth before he is torn away from the plane, and the sword lands in Silithus, which is where Azeroth's lifeblood starts leaking out of the earth as a mineral that both the Horde and the Alliance want to use as a resource. So the area is that's where Silithids come from. If you've seen the card Silithid Swarmer, that is where the Silithids come from, and as well as the Karaji are there, which are a cult that praises Cthulhu. So it might be kind of old Gotti. It might be kind of Titan-ish, and it also might touch on the conflict between the Horde and the Alliance. Any number of those themes would be reasonable to touch on, and of course, the storyline through a bunch of cards is going to be different than a very linear storyline that WoW is able to flesh out.
So, are we gonna have to start calling you Lore Master Hat in
It's
honor of Lore Master Eve?
I
It's
will
Lore
take
Master
a
Hat.
tiny Lore Master Eve moment for my own because I am an incredible fan of the work she does over in Velen's Chosen.
It's so good. It's so
Oh my god, it's
good.
amazing. We could talk about that all day, but unfortunately, we don't have the time for it. But if you are a Velen's Chosen fan or if you are a fan of lore, please go listen to what Eve is doing over in that podcast. It's a great podcast already, and she's kind of making her own little mark on it on how good the lore is, along with, her and Grant and Rob do a fantastic job in the podcast every week. Okay, so
And just real quick, I added a link in there to the Reddit post that brought up that cenariancircle.com is a domain registered, probably by Blizzard, and it basically says that they always register their domains through GoDaddy, so it is likely that that is going to be the next set.
yay. And hey, Speaking of new things, who here plays Arena? This is awkward. Okay.
Crickets.
Well, I have played a fair amount of Wild Arena the past month. We've got some arena changes. Maybe that will change after these new changes are implemented, because Arena is going to go through a big renaissance here. First of all, the new cards from BlizzCon that we voted on by clapping very scientifically will be implemented for a limited time. Second, and this is, I think, is the biggest change, is that they're going to start giving you choices of cards based on power level, not just rarity. So they're going to take the cards' win rates based on their internal statistics and show you 3 cards that are close in power level to each other. And this is much better than the current system, where there's usually an outlier and then a couple cards that are worse, or there's 3 really bad cards, or there's 1 card that's really good and 1 card that's mediocre. They're going to try and balance the cards in power level to make every choice interesting, which I think is fantastic. Legendaries will still be in sets of 3. Picks 1, 10, 20, and 30 will still be at least rare or better. They are temporarily disabling the new expansion, giving you more cards. They're trying to keep a more balanced pool. When the next expansion hits, the new arena cards will leave, and they are trying to remove lower quality cards from arena in total, so you'll no longer get like Ancient Watcher and other. There are 2 other crappy cards. Like, there are some cards that don't do anything. What, Ancient Watcher, Eerie Statue, and Humongous Razor Leaf. You'll never see the 3 of those together again. What do you all think? Any of you played any arena recently enough to have opinions on this?
So my thing with Arena is it can be one of the most frustrating experiences in the world, while one of the most rewarding, because you'll sit there and draft as well as you can, and then you'll come in, and I've said this before, but like, you'll come into these games and you'll have these people who are making major misplays, but it doesn't matter because their quality of deck is that much higher than yours, right? So it's one of those things where if they are trying to level that out, so they're not just giving you random rare, common, epic, or legendary cards, I think that will have a strong positive influence on the meta, where you are way more likely, if you're a high skill arena player, be able to draft a deck that is going to beat people, but it won't completely remove this, like, the luck factor of arena. So I think this sounds really intriguing, and I think it could be a really positive experience for arena, because arena is one of those things that Blizzard really doesn't talk about. They'll give out notes and they'll give out, little statistics, but arena is this like black box where you don't really know what they're doing often. If you ever listen to the Light Forge guys go off about arena, there are offering rate things that Blizzard doesn't tell people, and that goes back to where there's these other entities that kind of take the data from players and kind of gather the data regardless. But even then, you're not even truly gathering the data in a 100% accurate fashion, because Blizzard does things in arena like micro adjustments, and these things kind of keep a lot of the true happenings of arena hidden from average players, and people who play a lot of arena kind of get ticked off by that. So it's an interesting thing, and it's an interesting attempt to show that they are trying to improve it, that arena isn't an afterthought for Team 5, and that honor has kind of moved on to Wild.
Yeah, I think just from my perspective on Arena, I'm not a huge fan, but maybe with some of the newer cards that are Arena only, I could potentially give it a chance again. I don't know. Do we know how long the Wild event? It's coming to an end, relatively soon, I believe. So I mean, once it goes back to standard and we get those newer cards, I wouldn't mind maybe checking it out. I definitely want to see what those cards are first, because I'm not all too familiar with them. But I think, is it 1 per class? Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, the Wild event is over in 4 days from this recording on the 11th, and it is 1 card per class. They were voted on at BlizzCon, and some of them are really
Yeah,
interesting, whereas some of them are a little suspect, like the Warlock one.
gotcha. Are they all the same rarity or?
I don't think so because they're pretty wildly different in effect and power level. The
Gotcha.
Shaman
Okay.
one better not be the same rarity as the Warlock one. For those that aren't sure, the Shaman one is called Crackling Doom. It's 0 mana, overload 10, deal 12 to every minion. And the Warlock one is 0 mana, replace your entire hand with random demons. I really hope those are not the same rarity.
And the mage one is polymorph question mark. And you select a minion and then discover a minion, and then that minion becomes the discovered minion.
It's kind of interesting if you saw the cards that they offered, and as Hat talked about earlier, they literally picked by the audience at BlizzCon clapping. There were some broken cards that they had pitched, and I don't. None of these cards have rarities, right? They're all just like common cards, right? They're not like rarity wise
Looking
given
at the
any.
image, there's no gem. So
Yeah,
right
that's
now
what I'm
they're
saying.
all
Yeah, they're
basic
like what is it?
cards.
What is that called? Like a basic card then?
I'm assuming that they're going to assign rarities or well, since they're not going to be balancing on rarity anymore, I'm assuming that
Yeah.
they're going to assign all of these um, a a power level that they'll be drafted with because if they're drafting cards now based on power level, not based on rarity, then it almost doesn't matter. Because these are never going to be openable in packs, and none of them are ever going to be legendary because they're all spells except for one weapon.
Yep. I don't have a lot to say about Arena because I'm just not interested in it, but hopefully all these changes make people enjoy Arena more or allow other people to enjoy Arena. So the next thing we want to cover is Dave Kosak sent out a little tweet here about him heading outdoors, where he basically just says nothing gets the juices flowing like some time outdoors, and going camping and looking for the next expansion. So I have a feeling we'll be getting some information on a new expansion relatively soon, maybe a little bit later in the month. And then after that, we have the Wild Brawliseum has ended, and we have a link to a couple of the 12-win decks from the Brawliseum. You have a lot of your kind of the expected decks in there, your Giants Lock, your Cube Lock, Aggro Shaman. But then towards the bottom, they have some somewhat interesting ones, like there's a aggro token druid down there, and a Reno Lock, and a Reno Mage, as well as Mr. Yagut's 12-win Kingsbane Millrogue, which I've actually been playing a reasonable amount of when I need a break from Standard Ladder, and it's pretty interesting. It's just like in Standard, it is terrible against all of the aggressive decks, but very, very strong against all of the slow decks, assuming you don't get, Naga Sea Witched on turn 4 or 5 and a million giants coming out. But anyway, did you guys get a chance to do some Brawliseums? Any of you guys get a 12-win run in there?
I only ended up doing the free run, and I went 8-3, and I lost to 2 standard hunter decks because I'd found a OTK Druid list that I had taken out one of the UIs and put in the Twig of the World Tree instead, because I played a bunch of Wild last month, and I think that in the OTK Druid list that often 2 UIs are too much for that list, for any of those lists. And so I just kind of tinkered with it, and I went 8-3. Like I said, I lost to a Wild Aggro Paladin and then 2 standard hunter lists, and I'm like, I hate you people so much. Why are you playing? Like, I did not see one wild card in either one of those 100 decks, and I'm just like, oh,
Maybe
There,
they don't have any wild cards, Rod. Why you got to be upset?
Yeah.
If anything, you're more advantaged because they don't have all of the full gamut of
It ma-
cards.
it makes me feel crappy because I'm losing to decks that are less because they're aggro. They have less of an advantage, and they still kick my butt, Bodicus. And I can be an unreasonable person at times.
Well, and
So-
you lost to a strategy that had an advantage over what you were doing. It doesn't mean that the cards matter necessarily. Like, you could be playing Wild Quest Rogue and still lose to a Standard Hunter because the hero power kills you. Like, none of the cards actually matter. I think what they did differently this time is that Heroic Tavern Brawl would be a lot lower competitive quality if the first entry was free. And the one run that I did with Aggro Shaman, my first opponent played a turn 1 Goldshire Footman coin Blessing of Might It. So
That's strong play.
it's not going to be the same quality of opponent, and also my opponent, to quote the card, was ready for action.
I can't even tell you the cluster beep of a deck I saw first. It was ranked 25 bad, and I'm just like, I'm sorry what I'm about to do to you. it was like the person was obviously a casual player and who'd come in for the weekly tavern brawl, and I was like, I'm so sorry for this because it was one of the ugliest games of Hearthstone I've ever played.
Yeah. So on the Blizzlet podcast, Daniel was saying like he thought that there was a hidden MMR or something with the Brawlician, and I was like, my first I played against multiple Prince Malchazar decks in the Tavern Brawl, so I think you just got a little unlucky that half of your people had like the legend card backs, and it's like
I mean, he is my Hearthstone son, and so he gets my luck when it comes to Hearthstone, so that is why.
What about you, Ferris? Did you get a chance to participate in the Wild Brawlicium?
Yeah, so I actually jumped in with an aggro druid deck, and I played against two priests back to back, and I lost both games. I'm just like, this is how it's gonna go down, isn't it? And from there, I was actually able to pull off 7 wins in a row, but unfortunately lost to a Murloc Paladin to get knocked out. But it was pretty successful up to that point, and had a good time playing it. So.
And
7
how
wins
did
in a
you do
row.
did you just do one run or did you do a couple?
I did the one Aggro Shaman run, and I really like the deck, but I think that I was only playing a single Urshock, and I think that was probably a mistake, and I didn't have any Maelstrom Portal, so I actually was having trouble against Paladins more than anything, because I was running Maelstrom Portal, and I had, I think, actually Argent Squire over Maelstrom Portal, and I was trying out Argent Squire. It was nice to have a 1-drop, but it was way more important to have that AoE, and I was really missing it, so I had some rough matchups against Paladin where they just kind of took the board, and I didn't have enough burn to finish things off through a Righteous Protector or Sunkeeper Tarim turn, and Paladin turns on you quick. Turns out that they can kind of build a board out of nowhere and then kill you with it, especially with Quartermaster. That card's real good. Like, when you're filling the board with recruits anyways, and you don't mind if they're 1/1s, it turns out that if you make them 3/3s, they kill you faster. So
Kill you much faster.
I learned that repeatedly in the 5-win bracket, which is where I ended up finishing.
So I did a few more runs than you guys. I did 9 runs, I think, based on how
Sweet
many packs I
Jesus.
currently have. My first run was with Aggro Shaman, and I got 10 wins. I think overall my wins were like a couple 10 wins, a couple 8 wins, a 7, a few 6s, and a 5. So overall, I think I had a lot of really good runs in there. Played Aggro Shaman. I think I said this earlier, but I played Aggro Shaman. I played I played Giants Warlock. I played a little bit of Giants Hunter too. And I was thinking, going into this, I was thinking, well, Giants Hunter is just more consistent, which I do believe that it is. But the issue is that Giants Hunter will very consistently get out 2 or 3 giants on turn 5, whereas Warlock will not as consistently do that. But when they do their Sea Witch thing, it's usually 3 or 4 giants, and it's much harder to deal with 3 or 4 giants, whereas there are decks that can deal with 1 or 2. So let's see. We'll move on to the next little item we have here. StarCraft's 20th anniversary is coming soon. StarCraft themed Tavern Brawl. If you play the Tavern Brawl between March 31st and March 25th, you get 3 Kobolds and Catacombs packs. Might possibly be an event with a card back like Diablo had last year. We're already pretty late into this podcast, so let's just move right along. Yonglu had an interview about tournament mode. We have a link in here, basically just kind of very in-depth IGN article where they go over their pretty much all the questions that you want to know about tournament mode. Lots of concerns about it, but I am hopeful that version 1 will just be the test, and then when it gets released out of the beta, we'll have a lot more to look forward to. Any notes about that? I know, Hat, you were talking about tournament mode pretty positively last week. Did you get a chance to check out this article?
I didn't, but I'm going to
Okay.
because I want tournament mode real bad.
Anything to add, Rod?
I haven't read a whole lot about it, like I said, because it seems like it's so far out. I'd rather just wait till it gets closer and they're actually releasing details that are more permanent.
Right. Okay. Fairst, anything before we go to the tournaments?
I mean, the only thing I would like to know is when is it coming? I don't think we got that information, and I'm not sure when they were really thinking. Hopefully it's before BlizzCon, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
I'm sure the beta will be out before BlizzCon. We'll just kind of have to see what kind of beta it is, if it's lots of people get to participate in it, or if it's going to be very selective. So anyway, Hat, we've spent a long time so far. Let's get into tournaments.
Let's do that.
It's the grand tournament!
All right, so we had some tournaments that were less conventional, but I'm not going to call them less important, even though they may not have shown up on a lot of radars. There were actually 3 tournaments that got cast on the main Hearthstone channel this weekend. One was the Korea Team Champs. Now, here's what's interesting. I wasn't able to find a single bit of information on it on English-speaking websites. The only match that got cast was the finals. But it turns out this has been a Korean tournament with a $25,000 prize pool. It's been going on for 2 months, and 100 teams were in the tournament. 100 teams. And now we're down to 2. The format is fascinating. It's like each match is conquest, but the players do like a last hero standing sort of thing, whereas 3 of the 4 players play any given match. When a player loses, they sit down, and when a player wins, they stay. And they play the same deck. So the player that wins gets to stay. That's kind of a last hero sitting, I guess, last hero playing, and then they play Conquest in their individual matches. So the finals were the only thing that were on the Play Hearthstone channel. Falcone and Gia D, who we mentioned last week and did a fantastic job this week as well, cast it. There was the team Doling Stones. That's like rolling, but with a D. I'm sure there's some kind of joke there that I don't get. Kranich led that team along with Shanghai, Ghost, and Maru. And then Team Overload were their opponents in the finals: Alpi, Pavian, Joram, and Fire. We also had Team Doling Stones won the tournament. They were led by Kranich, who actually went on a 3-0 sweep of his 3 opponents, beating Joram, then Alpi, then Pavian. He came back from 2 reverse sweeps. What a god. Really impressive performance there. We'll talk a little bit more about the decks in a minute. We also have the Wild Open Regional Finals. They're underway. There are going to be 4 different regional tournaments where the top 2 players go on to the Wild Grand Finals that are this weekend. The America and EU playoffs are done, whereas APAC and China are not done quite yet. The way it works is that the top 8 players from the qualifiers, they split into 2 groups of 4. Those are kind of mini 4-person tournaments. The winner of each of those goes on to the Grand Finals. In EU, we had Alex MM win one of the brackets, and Faeli, Faeli, win the other bracket. And in America, we had Jonah Ra and Dab take the win. Now, some known players in America, actually, Sidonia, Rosti, Breezy, and Banana Ramek were all in that top 8. So these are some known wild players, and in Rosti and Sidonia's case, known pro players. So they made it pretty far, but didn't make it to the grand finals. TESPA's going on this week. The collegiate champs are going. We're playing through March 20th, so we're still pretty early on. But a few show matches were played on the Twitch cast, casted by our own Cora and a caster named Edge SKL, who I think it was his first big Hearthstone cast. And then also UHL finals happened this past weekend. They were cast by Bodicus and Wickagood over on twitch.tv/United Hearthstone League. So Ridiculous Hat won that tournament over Spiver. It was a tight 9-game series in the finals, but make sure you go and check that out. As far as the tournament meta goes, we only got one standard tournament here, and we only saw one player in the Korean Hearthstone tournament finals. That was Kranich. He won 3 times in a row with a lineup of Spell Hunter, Dude Paladin, Spiteful Priest, and Zoo Warlock. Against Joram, Alpi, and Pavian, he played against different decks. They all had some kind of Priest. They all had some kind of Paladin. And there were 2 mages that we saw. We only saw 1 Warlock. It was banned once. And it was the only Warlock we saw was a Zoo Warlock. So it's kind of interesting to see how the meta is a little bit different. You normally go into these metas expecting Paladin, Priest, and Warlock in every lineup, and that was the case for Kranich, the winner. But his fourth deck was Spell Hunter, definitely very interesting, and Zoo Warlock over Control Warlock is not what we expected. In the other lineups, Quest Rogue definitely indicated that Alpi planned on banning Paladin and beating Warlock, but he didn't quite get there, as we'll go into a little bit in the games to watch section. As far as Wild, well, this format is diverse, and that's the thing you'll notice on the cast. Wild is starting to get attention on a higher level, more so than it ever has in the past. Now, you'll notice it from the casting. They were well-intentioned, but a little bit less informed about the format than we've seen previously. And the players as well were a little bit more raw, especially on the tournament stage, than the players we're used to seeing, and some of the play was less refined. Bot and Rod, did you manage to catch any of the Wild cast?
I did not, but I saw the tweets from the notorious Danny Donuts, and it seems like the level of play upset some very high ranked Wild players such as Danny Donuts, and it looks like it caused a little bit of a crap storm on Twitter with Danny quoting that he was embarrassed to be a Wild player, something like. So yeah, it just seems like it created a little bit of a controversy.
Yeah, I unfortunately was not able to really catch much of it, but from what I understand is Control, F2K Control was supposed to be out helping with the casting, and I think his absence may have cost them a little bit in terms of how the cast went, but hopefully it just means that the more of these Wild tournaments we get, the better everything kind of goes with that. The increased skill level of the players and the knowledge of the casters just increases over time as they get used to having tournaments like this. So kind of unfortunate that this one didn't go as well as I'm sure some of the prominent Wild players were hoping, but just hopefully looking for a brighter future.
So one of the funny parts about the Control thing was he tweeted out, "I'm not going to be able to make it to casting, and I'm also currently sitting in a holding cell." So it seemed like leaving Canada was a major problem for him. So
yeah, I think he had visa issues or something.
It sounds like he had all kinds of issues. Like, gosh.
Yeah, I don't know why or what happened, but yeah, if he was in a holding cell, it sounds like someone was not happy with him. But to be fair, Canada doesn't like you coming into their country with like parking tickets, so they want very nice individuals coming into Canada.
I guess I've been okay getting into Canada multiple times. I don't know what that says about me or them, but either way, and Fairst, did you manage to catch any of the Wild?
Yeah, I caught a little bit of it today. I had it on mute, so I was just checking it out here and there. But I mean, it does sound like there was definitely some uproar from the community. You can only hope for the best moving forward, and hopefully they can figure things out on their end as far as from a casting aspect. So we'll see how it goes in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what's going to happen. We're all obviously happy that Wild's getting a better spotlight, and those first steps are going to be a little bit rocky. I'm just happy that the format is getting some representation, even though it's not going to be quite as polished as the 8-person caster teams and the thoroughly researched deck lists in the mostly solved metagames that we see in standard. And you see a lot of that in these deck choices that everyone kind of has their own idea about how the format goes down. The big classes are Paladin, Warlock, and Mage. And then Druid and Priest are pretty commonly seen, but there's no one lineup here that is mostly seen. You've got some Jade Druids, some Aggro Druids, you've got a lot of Mali Druids. There's Secret Mages, but also there's some OTK Mages that are like Quest Mage, except instead of the quest, they just play Emperor Thorsun, just play everything in one turn. There's Big Priests, there's Spiteful Priests, there's Combo Priests, there's Murloc Paladins, Dude Paladins, there's a little bit of everything here. And it was really interesting to watch these different games and see how everyone kind of had their own take on the format and what was worthwhile. So there were not that many games that we saw recorded on the Twitch channel. We only really got the top 8. There were actually some players where they only played 2 matches and they had the same deck banned both times and the deck lists are closed. So we don't even know what they were playing. In the case of Jonah Ra versus Gozan, both those players Jonah Ra got his Druid banned twice, and Gozan got his Priest banned twice, so we don't even know what those decks are. But I will tell you that these tournaments were fun to watch, even if the format is a little bit more raw, a little bit more nascent. Of the 2 games to watch this week, one is from the Korean Team Championships. That's Kranich versus Alpi. Kranich is playing a Spiteful Priest, and Alpi is playing a Quest Rogue. And it's a 12-minute long matchup that does not go at all where you think it's going to go. And then game 2 in the Wild Open Championship Finals of Dab versus Breezy is a 23-minute Big Priest mirror. The game has lots of ups and downs. I will say there are points where there are plays made that I don't necessarily agree with. But I will also say the game is exciting and is fun and is a Hearthstone rocket ride that is totally worth watching if you have 25 minutes and you can stomach a Big Priest mirror. There are a bunch of other games out there worth watching. If you have more time, watch Jonah Ra versus Gozun. There's a really, really interesting game 1. But those are the 2 games I would strongly recommend watching. As far as Team Tespa goes, Koracast, Edgecast, Bodikus, I know you watched a little bit of this. Did anything stand out to you?
So the match that I watched was, oh man, I know Maryland was one of the teams, but I'm not going to be able to do it justice. But essentially, one team brought a full control lineup, and the other team brought a completely anti-control lineup with Kingsbane Mill Rogue, and Fatigue Warrior, and the games were not particularly close. So that was the only one I was able to catch, unfortunately. But be looking forward to future weeks. Always love watching Koracast.
Same. She's real good at it. Turns out that when you go to school
Same.
for radio and are naturally really charismatic, that you're good at that sort of thing. And then coming next week, we've got the Wild Open. I believe the finals are this weekend. And then we've also got the HCT Toronto at EGLX. So we will be talking about that in detail next week. But for now, that's all we got for the tournament section. Why don't we talk about some dexplanations? Because I know that our own resident 19-time legend in the past 2 months, Mr. Bodikus, has some words of wisdom to share about the lovely combo Dragon Priest.
So this week, we were trying to think of a dexplanation topic all day, and I realized that we haven't really gone in depth on a deck in a while. And there's been this little deck called Combo Dragon Priest, and I've been playing it quite a bit over the past few months. Usually, my Legend Climbs, I've been trying to switch decks and do kind of a different deck each time, but this deck, I think the past 5 times that I've hit Legend have all been this deck, and it just really speaks to me. So I figured we could go over one of the more complicated parts of the deck, which is the Mulligan phase. the mulligans for this deck can be very difficult and very matchup specific and very hand context specific. So I'm going to be giving you some general guidelines. I want you guys to keep in mind that some of these opinions, I'm still working through things. As many games as I've played with this deck, I'm still experimenting with some of the cards to keep in mulligans. So take it with a grain of salt. But in general, I think these are fairly fleshed out. So Northshire Cleric and Netherspite Historian are keeps in basically every single matchup. These are just very strong cards. You really want to be able to do it. You really want to be doing stuff on turn 1 and 2, and these are just your best options. Even I will keep Netherspite Historian without a dragon in my opener. The decision on whether to play it on turn 2 or not, generally you're not going to be playing it on turn 2 if you don't have a dragon, but when you do have a dragon, it's just very, very strong. Radiant Elemental is usually a keep, not always, but if you are keeping it, then you will tend to keep cards like Power Word Shield, whereas usually I mulligan Power Word Shield in favor of just getting like an early creature. But those two pair so well together that it's generally a keep. Cabal Talon Priest is almost always a mulligan unless you already have one of your early game creatures. Like if you're already keeping a cleric or a radiant, then I'll keep Cabal Talon Priest because being able to put those stats on something else early game just gives you so much control. I will almost always keep a dragon if I already have a historian in hand, but usually mulligan them away unless the matchup calls for that specific dragon. All of the combo pieces are pretty matchup dependent, but in general, I lean towards mulliganing them. I've experimented a bit with keeping them in certain matchups with medium success. But in general, if you don't know whether to keep it or not, I generally mulligan combo pieces. So I did kind of a class breakdown here of how I look at the mulligans. So everything above applies, but here are some specifics. Against Paladin, Dustbreaker and Potion of Madness are your all-star cards. You always keep them unless you're sure it's a control Paladin. The Dude Paladin is one of your worst matchups. It's one of the hardest one, mainly because of Steward of Darkshire. And Tarim, so it's very important to try to dominate the board early and force an early Tarim. And if you are able to do that, you can generally win from there, but a lot of times they just kind of put together a sticky board that Dustbreaker doesn't deal with very well and grind you out in the later game because you got to keep your hand size relatively small to play around Hat's favorite card, Divine Favor. Let's see. I love getting a little bit of jab over there at Hat for that.
Yeah, well,
So
anyone
Warlock,
could have seen that Divine Favor and Call to Arms together are going to be great, right, Bouticus?
yeah, I guess not. Let's see. So Warlock, this is a fairly close matchup. I generally feel fairly favored against them, but it's important to have an early game creature. And if you already have one, you can actually keep a combo priest in the slower Warlock matchup because not a lot of them are running silences. So you can kind of just make a big minion early, or the game will come down to sometimes you can make it into a value game where you're using, if your Draconid Operatives gives you good cards, then you can get stuff like their Nazoth or their Gul'dan and kind of grind them out with like their own Void Lords some of the time. Let's see. The priest matchup. You do your best to kind of play around Dustbreaker in the early game and always keep it in mind when you're making your trades. Elixir is a card that's teched in my list that's not in a lot of other lists, which really helps out with your early game because you play a Northshire Cleric on one, they play a Northshire Cleric, and then eventually you can use yours to trade with theirs with the Elixir, which is kind of backbreaking in a lot of situations. It also helps you trade into their Draconid Operatives. The way the matchup plays out, it ends up being a very strong card. Something you always have to look out is getting reverse comboed. And for those of you who don't know what that is, the card Twilight Acolyte if you have a dragon in hand, reduces the power of their creature to 2. So sometimes if you've completely lost the board, you have no hopes of getting it back. A way you can end up winning some of these matchups like Priest or like Warlock is to Twilight Acolyte their minion, Potion of Madness, and then do your Divine Spirit Innerfire combo. So a lot of times when you're playing the exact Innerfire Mirror, you have to be very wary of your minion's health. And sometimes it's actually correct to heal like their minions so that you can reverse combo and et cetera, et cetera. Very complicated. Rogue, getting early board presence is important, and then following up with large dragons because they have a really hard time dealing with Draconid operatives and stuff like that. Druid, making a big early minion is generally pretty good because they don't have... This deck generally doesn't run silence effects or naturalize, so just a big minion early is pretty good. Mage, I have found to be a very good matchup for me, as long as you can remove their board early. If their creatures don't get in a lot of damage, eventually they have to use their burn on your creatures and generally end up losing the game from there, so Dustbreaker is very important. And then Shaman, Dustbreaker deals with most of their early stuff, but it's important to develop pressure in case they're an evolved version, and you don't want to let them kind of do the evolve things and get behind. Hunter, the 2 important cards are Dustbreaker to deal with their Spellstone and Twilight Acolyte to deal with Yasiraj, and pretty much none of their other cards matter a whole lot. So those are important cards to get in your mulligan. My last little note here is that something I learned about unidentified elixir, and specifically the Elixir of Shadows, which creates a 1/1 version of it, is if you use it on their minion, you are the one that gets the 1/1 copy. So some of the plays I've made is obviously to use that elixir on their Void Lord, and then you get a 1/1 Void Lord against Warlock, so it can help you stall for a couple extra turns and you might be able to reverse combo them. The other cool play I did was to use that specific elixir on a Yasiraj and then Twilight Acolyte it, so that I got a 1/1 Yasiraj that pulled out something, and then you could even like silence it to make it a 10/10. There's all kinds of funky plays you can do, which is a big reason why I enjoy Unidentified Elixir. So Rod, you said you've been playing a little bit of this combo Priest. Have these experiences that I've kind of talked about lined up with how you've experienced it, or what's your opinions on it?
A lot of it is I haven't I think the Warlock matchup I'm not good at. I think that your list sounds like it handles that a little bit better than what I've been running. I think I've been running Orange's list, which has like a Lyra in it, and I'm not completely sure. I've said it before. I love Lyra. I love that card in concept, but in a deck where you're kind of trying to do very specific things, I think she might be a little awkward.
I also have Lyra in my list just for the record, and
Okay.
it's actually slightly better in my list because of Unidentified Elixir.
Yeah.
Because when you get that Elixir of Shadows, which obviously isn't always the case, but when you get that and you're able to go Lyra, Radiant Elemental, and then make a extra 1/1 Radiant Elemental with that, then you start doing really gross things. So the big thing that I've seen on a lot of these lists is Mass Dispel.
Yeah.
I've seen it be good for some people. Like I just saw a Twitch clip of Fino winning the game off of a Mass Dispel. But in my experience, from what I've seen, is it's too much mana for too little of an effect. I think it's mainly there to handle specifically the N'Zoth and the Gul'dan turns in the Warlock matchup. So maybe it's worth a spot in there, but
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of it.
But overall, the deck is a blast. It's one of those things where I think you have a shot in almost any game, because you could have these busted starts that are just like you're like giggling like a schoolgirl because you're playing 2 Radiant Elementals and just playing, shields, and you're doubling your health and you're stealing their minions. It's just the stuff that can be accomplished with the deck is some of the most fun these are the kind of Hearthstone decks that I really, really, truly love. When I like learn to understand them, and I actually feel like I've had a pretty good time against Paladin. Unlike you, I haven't played the deck nearly as much though, but like I think I have a winning record against Paladin right now. I've I think I'm like I said, my worst record's probably against Warlock. So it might be my list and what Orange set up his list to do and just going there. But man, I have had a blast with the deck when it's fun to learn because it feels like rewarding. It feels like you're accomplishing something. It's not a curve stone deck by any means, and you can do some really really cool stuff, which I really really like. So I think the deck is a blast, and it is one of the most complicated decks in the game right now, if not the most complicated. I think I think the only decks you could probably start saying are more complicated are some of these fatigue warrior lists and like super heavy control warrior lists that just have insane turns. But I think the deck's a blast. I like I said, it's really fun and really strong.
Yeah, my win rate against Paladin is very, very high, but uh I've been playing against way, way more Murloc Paladins, and I think my win rate against Murloc Paladin is just kind of through the roof because I have double Potion of Madness, and the Elixir helps a lot in that matchup too. But the Dude Paladin matchup for my deck, since I don't have Mass Dispel, I could definitely see Mass Dispel being really good against Dude Paladin specifically. But yeah, just even though I have a pretty good win rate against Dude Paladin, that matchup feels terrible, and I feel like I'm high rolling when I beat it. So it might be a little different. But Fairst, have you played against Combo Priest at all on ladder?
I haven't played against it. Generally, I see more of like the Big Priest or um, Spiteful Priest. But as far as playing this deck, I have played versions of it in the past. But I don't have Lyra, unfortunately. That seems to be a pretty, key card in the list that I'm seeing. So I don't have much experience with it, but I definitely see with the cards that are within the deck, all the crazy combos and shenanigans that can go off with this deck. It looks like it could be a lot of fun, and especially with the meta that we're in, it looks like it could be quite useful.
Yeah, a lot of people have actually been exchanging Lyra for like a seventh dragon is fairly common nowadays. So definitely worth still trying it out.
Which
Some people just are just not fans of Lyra. In my experience, it's been very good for me, but I also just am a huge fan of cards like Auctioneer, and it feels very Auctioneer like when you're going off with it. So
which dragon were you like? Is there a certain dragon that to replace Lyra, or really anything?
Bookworm.
Bookworm.
A lot. I've seen quite a few lists with Bookworm over Lyra. I've even heard of some people cutting Twilight Drake from some of these lists, and so I'll have to delve into that a bit more to find out the list. But I've heard a lot of people going up to 7, trying to go to 7 dragons, because there are certain games where you won't have a dragon activator for your Twilight Acolyte, and they can get a little awkward. So Hat, before we wrap this up, you got any thoughts on Combo Dragon Priest? I hear I brought you over to the dark side a little bit.
I guess the light side is the dark side.
I guess
It's a fun deck. I've done actually a few coaching sessions with it. It's just to explain the mulligan is so difficult to do because you're kind of playing Dragon Priest, and you're kind of playing a combo deck, and you're kind of secretly playing a tempo deck while you're doing both. And how you mulligan is kind of looking for which portion of the deck you can build around that you have in your opening hand. It's very hard to explain, and it's kind of even difficult to implement in practice. What I think makes this deck so complicated is that you need to be fluid and flexible every turn because your game plan is going to revolve entirely around what your opponent is doing, almost always. And you have to know what they have. Like building an early big minion against Warlock is good because they rarely have non-damage based removal. Building a big individual minion against other decks is not going to be anywhere near as good. Like against most priests, they can usually deal with it, so you don't want to be facing them down. It's all about determining what makes sense in any given moment and how you're going to build around both the cards you have available to yourself, the game plan you need to follow and what your opponent is doing, and that makes it very difficult to pilot. So I appreciate you taking the time and putting together this explanations. Hopefully it helps a lot of people out.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, I went through it pretty quickly because we were already gone on fairly lengthy on this episode. But make sure you reach out to me in the Discord. I'll be happy to answer any questions about this deck because I'm just a huge fan. I love playing it. It's definitely, as Rod said, it's very rewarding when you can win with it. So,
And just letting you know beforehand, it is not a deck you can pick up most of the time and feel comfortable with it. It takes that learning curve can be super steep, and so it's a good deck to play at rank floors and maybe on casual if you're not comfortable, just to get a feel for it and not get frustrated, because if you're in the middle of rank floors trying to learn this deck, you might have a bad time at first.
good points.
Yes. And the only other question that we really have, Bodicus, is
How long can this go on?
we love talking, as you can probably notice, and I gotta give a shout out to my guest this week. You made nearly 2 hours feel like nothing, but it's time for us to start to mosey on out of here. Let me talk through this outro real quick. First of all, we want to give thanks to Stefan L for letting us use his cover. Check him out on his channel. And then we want to give big thanks to HearthstoneTopDecks.com and BeerBrick.com for deckless, Hearthpwn for their survival guides, and Hearthstone tournaments on YouTube. If it weren't for Hearthstone tournaments, I would not have been able to do the tournament section this week, so thank you so much for the immediate and thorough archiving of tournament VODs. You can find the show notes for this week's episode on our website on CoinConcede.com. You can support us at Patreon.com/CoinConcede. You can join us every week live by going to twitch.tv/CoinConcedePodcast, join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com, right into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com, follow us on Twitter at CoinConcede, check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/CoinConcede, and head over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com if you want to buy some stuff. Big thanks to our producers, Calum CV, Viriatus, and
It's so fluffy!
our buddy Fluffy. Fairst, I'm starting with you. What is your coin concede this week?
So my coin concede is I want to give a shout out to everybody involved with the United Hearthstone League. You, Rod, Bot, everybody else. And big shout out to the awesome community. I can just give a couple quick shout outs to Spartacus Vet. He did an awesome job just building the hype, week in and week out. So I just want to give a big shout out to all you guys, and I appreciate all your time and effort.
Thanks, man. And I'll go next because I appreciate your time and effort. How about that? You've been coin conceded too in response to your coin concede. Because the amount of work that you put into this league has been really incredible. So thank you so much for that. I want to give a shout out as well to Spivey and Chris for being gracious opponents in UHL. I want to give a shout out to the pod people. That's my THL team. We made the playoffs. Woo! And by the way, Chris is also on that team. So all these different podcasts just weave together. So shout out to the pod people. That's Chris. That's Zeroshio from Hero Power, and our buddy Mojo Powell and Dyrus Bear from the Brewmasters podcast. And I want to give a shout out to the Daring Reporter. I did a brief interview with them. That'll be on episode 13 over there. So that's Jordan Lingo and Kurt. Big props to those guys. Rod, who's your coin concede this week?
So I want to give a shout out to the last two guests of the Tier 5 podcast. This week we had Ant. Ant came on and was hysterical and funny and just a really good dude that if you don't know Ant from competitive Hearthstone, he is one of the most likable people in the entire scene who is he's just like Santa Claus, but not, he's got that jolly, loving nature that makes everybody smile and laugh. And a real big shout out to who we had on the show last week. We had Toast the Badger, and I can't tell, I can't even describe how important I think the interview we did with her was about women in the community. And I feel like it's one of the most important things I've ever done in my entire life, doing that interview and just putting that out there and just making an effect on people. And so I want to give a shout out to those two because they've been two of my favorite things I've ever done with Tier 5. And it has been a blast hearing how the community has responded to them. So those are my shout outs.
Spartacus, how you doing?
Doing great. I got a nice little coin concede here to Mr. Wickagood. Mentioned a few times on the show already, but I wanted to bring up this funny little note. So Fairst and I did cast the first semifinal between Hat and Chris Plummer, and right after that, Fairst wanted to do a little bit more of the behind the scenes, and so we reached out to Wickagood and said, "Hey, what are you doing in a couple hours?" And he's like, "Nothing." So he came on and did the cast with me, and did the cast for the finals with me as well. And so I appreciate him being flexible and coming on and keeping me company during the cast. It was a lot of fun, and if you guys want, you should definitely go check out the recap of it, because I had a blast doing it.
Yeah, big shout out to Wicked. He definitely helped us out this past weekend. I did a really great job.
Yay. So much
And
goodness.
Wicked is generally one of the best people in the community besides his love for Big Priest. He's super understanding and has awesome views on everything, and he's just a cool dude to talk to.
I agree, and he is a fellow Mass native like myself, so you know that he has good taste in seafood and accents. So, Fairst, we'd love to know where we can find you when you're not on this podcast. Where can we hear from you or talk to you?
Yes, you can find me at my personal Twitter at Fairst Biscuit. And then obviously we have everything as far as the United Hearthstone League goes. Again, that's going to be at United HS League. And then we're also on Twitch at twitch.tv/United Hearthstone League, as well as at UnitedHearthstoneLeague.com.
And Rod, buddy, where can people find you when you're not on this podcast or any number of other podcasts?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Rod_Johnston. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Rod_Johnston. You can find my podcast, Tier 5 Podcast, on basically every major podcast thing besides Spotify. Someday Spotify, I'll conquer you. So that's iTunes, Podbean, Google, all those things. Tier 5 is there. And before you go downloading it and sending me complaint emails and letters and snail mail, whatever you do, it is a little bit not safe for work, just a little bit. So just take that in mind and go into it willing. We have a good time over there. And we have a Discord, which is discord.me/tier5. So those are my main hangouts.
Sounds good. And it really, not safe for work is not the right phrase because it depends on where you work. But I will say that if you have children that are particularly impressionable, I would maybe wear some headphones.
I have had an interview that specifically mentioned a phrase that has become almost an anthem for my podcast. And it's all because of a 4-star iTunes review.
Man. Well, we're not going to repeat that here, but go check out Tier 5. Bodicus, where can we find you when you're not right here?
I'm on Twitter at BodicusHS, twitch.tv/Bodicus if you want to see me playing some combo Dragon Priest and trying to do my best to explain my plays as best as possible.
And you can find me, twitter.com/ridiculoushat, twitch.tv/ridiculoushat, any Discord, especially our own, just at ridiculoushat, and I will respond as soon as I am able. That'll do it today for our podcast, so keep calm and rogue on, and if you see us on the ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Take cold comfort in your victory. You win. I can rest now. You win. For now.
No, your victory proves nothing.
The day is yours.
I choose death. You have triumphed. This time, this hunt is yours.